If I can ask our County Administrator, Mr. Craig Meadows, if we can stand for invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's take a moment of silence and then I'll lead us in the pledge. Let us pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. And up first is presentation on the FY23 proposed county budget. Mr. Meadows?
Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. Good to see you this evening. This is the first time I've been on this side since we're back in here. This looks very nice. It's good to see everyone this evening. Vicky's handing out my comments. I'll wait till she gets that around.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Well, again, good evening, everyone. Dear honorable members of the Board of Supervisors, I am pleased to present to you the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget for Montgomery County. The proposed budget outlines the county's fiscal plan of operations for the upcoming year and was developed by our leadership team to meet the current and future needs of our county organization. The budget as proposed provides resources to address our core local government responsibilities and also provides funding for areas that must be addressed as part of our service to a growing community. For nearly 2 years now, our community has dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic. We have been blessed that Montgomery County has not been fiscally impacted to the degree other localities have been during this pandemic. While COVID-19 is still with us, the outlook for the new fiscal year suggests that our economy is recovering very well. Projections for the current fiscal year indicate the county revenues are trending higher for real estate, personal property, and sales taxes, and that this trend will likely continue into the new fiscal year. These are very positive trends. However, the county is also experiencing inflationary pressures, which also appear likely to continue into the immediate future. While we have weathered the pandemic very well from a financial standpoint, our employees have struggled at times to keep up with the constantly changing work landscape of Zoom meetings, mask mandates, illnesses in the workplace, illnesses in families, etc., etc. As I mentioned in my budget message last year, county staff has worked diligently to focus on the future. But many days our employees have simply been grateful to get through the workday without a new challenge or a new mandate. This proposed budget provides a significant investment in supporting our employees who are the cornerstone of our service to our citizens and to our businesses, as well as the momentum necessary to carry us forward into the year ahead. With momentum as the theme for this upcoming year, I am recommending to you tonight a proposed budget for all funds of $220.4 million for fiscal year 2022-2023. This budget as proposed represents an increase of $9.1 million or 4.3% over the current fiscal year and provides essential funding for continuation of our services to our citizens and businesses, maintains and strengthens the programs and activities of our various departments, and invests in our capital and human resources, which are crucial to maintaining a high level of service to our citizens and businesses. For fiscal year 2023, I am recommending no change in the real estate tax rate of 89 cents per $100 valuation. This marks the 10th consecutive year that I have recommended that the real estate tax rate remain level, and this also reflects strongly of the board's oversight on the county's fiscal affairs and financial condition. Included in this proposed budget is additional revenue of $100,000 in anticipation of implementation of a 30-cent per pack cigarette tax. The General Assembly enacted legislation in 2020 that gave counties the authority to levy a tax on the sale of cigarettes beginning July 1, 2021. If this item is approved by the board, this tax can be implemented quickly in early fiscal year 2023. These revenues will be used to support Parks and Recreation personnel if they are approved. The proposed fiscal year 2023 budget consists of $93.6 million provided from federal, state, and other designated funds, with the remaining $126.8 million representing county revenues, which are not designated for a specific purpose. As we shared with you in a presentation in January, the county expects undesignated revenue growth of $5.4 million for the new year. Proposed 2023 funding for the county's general fund, net of transfers to other funds, totals $58.3 million. This represents an increase of $4.6 million or 8.5% from the current fiscal year. Proposed funding for the Montgomery County Public Schools Operating Fund, net of transfers to other funds, totals $126.4 million, which is an increase from the current year of $4.4 million or 4%. The proposed fiscal year 2023 county budget also includes the Debt Service Fund, the School Nutrition Fund, the transfer to the School Capital Fund, the transfers to the County Capital Fund, funding for our economic development initiatives, and the Law Library Fund. Moving on from the charts which are included for your reference, to maintain the county's momentum in providing funding for future capital and maintenance projects, I'm proposing the county continue to provide funds for the following areas. For the School Capital Fund, that we continue to set aside 2.5 cents to the real estate tax rate, which equates to $2.3 million for future school capital projects. For the Fire and Rescue Capital Fund, 1.5 cents to the real estate tax rate that we continue to set aside, which represents $1.4 million for fire and rescue equipment. And for the County Capital Fund, $2.2 million, which is 1 cent of the real estate tax rate, as well as approximately $1.3 million from other revenues for capital and maintenance projects. As the county continues to grow, we must continue our momentum in addressing a number of critical long-term projects. With an ongoing designation of $2.3 million, dollars will continue to accrue annually for the next capital project prioritized by the school board. The Fire and Rescue Capital Fund will receive $1.4 million to ensure our volunteers are well equipped to provide high-quality service to our citizens. Other monies earmarked for the County Capital Fund provide dollars annually for the following projects. $425,000 for the Auburn Park project to move forward with the construction of the new park in Reiner, $210,000 for information technology infrastructure projects to address technology needs, approximately $904,000 or 1 cent of the real estate tax rate to set aside $100,000 for future Valley to Valley Trail projects and an $804,000 for other future county capital projects, and $750,000 for county capital maintenance projects to fund proactive preventive maintenance and large-scale building repairs or replacements. I've included a chart, as I do each year in my budget message, which outlines the major categories of the county's budget for the last 5 fiscal years. Also, in addressing the school's request of the $4,489,533 in additional county funding requested by the schools for fiscal year 2023, I'm recommending an additional $2.1 million for the school operating fund, which represents approximately 39% of the overall new revenue of the county's general fund. I'm also recommending that the county consider providing $920,000 in one-time funds from the county's fund balance for the acquisition of 8 new school buses for MCPS outside of the operating budget process. This will allow operating funds in the school's proposed budget to be used for other purposes within the MCPS system. As was shared with you in a recent presentation from Dr. Meyer, the Commonwealth has proposed a 5% salary increase for teachers, but at this point, the state budget appears to provide less than half. I want to say that again, less than half of the amount needed to provide all teachers in Montgomery County with this increase. This translates, at least to me, to another unfunded mandate from our state leadership and creates an additional funding challenge for our schools. We must continue to remind our state legislators that increased state funding for our schools, both for operations and for infrastructure, is critical to maintaining the high level of K-12 education that our county residents have come to expect from us. I have a chart included in the budget message which shows the amount of funding provided for education, which includes debt service and school capital projects for the past 5 years for your reference. I also have a chart that shows the amount of county funding provided for school operations over the past 10 fiscal years, along with the proposed funding from fiscal year 2023. If you look back to fiscal year 2014, we were providing $42.1 million. This year, we're proposing to provide $56 million. County staff is currently working with our financial advisors in anticipation of a bond sale this spring, which will provide funding for school and county capital projects. This proposed budget provides level funding for debt service for fiscal year 23. The county's portion of the proposed debt service budget includes sufficient capacity to absorb the estimated increased costs related to the debt issuance. Our financial advisors anticipate the additional school debt service will likely exceed the amount included in the proposed budget. However, at this point, any additional funds can be allocated from county reserves on a one-time basis for fiscal 2023 if needed. We won't know that for sure until we get to market with the bonds. Throughout the past 2 years, our county employees have been industrious, helpful, and steadfast in their commitment to service to our citizens, all during a time of increased demand for services. In recognition of our employees' efforts and in an attempt to address compensation challenges related to inflation, I am proposing a 5% general wage increase for all full-time and part-time classified employees effective July 1, 2022. For employees who have reached the top of their pay grade, I recommend a 5% one-time supplemental payment in lieu of a salary increase. Funding in the amount of $1,380,000 is included in the proposed budget to address this request, along with an additional $98,720 in funds to bring all positions in line with the proposed increase in the federal minimum wage. The preliminary results of our recent compensation and classification study show we have many positions throughout the county that are lagging behind the market rate for their respective positions. A previous study that was completed in 2018 identified this as an issue as well. However, at that point in time, we were only able to adjust compensation to reflect approximately 65% of the identified shortfall back in 2018. With our most recent study, we hope to address the market at a much more competitive level, ideally 90 to 95% of the market. I am proposing $939,702, to be exact, to implement the findings of the compensation and classification study and to show our employees that the county is committed to providing competitive pay and benefit for their efforts. For the 9th consecutive year, the county does not anticipate an increase in our health insurance premiums as employees continue prudent use of their health and prescription drug benefits. The county's Virginia retirement system rate increased for fiscal 23 from 12.44% to 13.7% at a cost of approximately $255,000. Vacancy and turnover savings of $382,247 were used to cover the VRS increase, with the balance offsetting the general wage increase. Another significant investment proposed in the upcoming fiscal year budget relates to the county's commitment to the safety and well-being of our citizens. The proposed budget includes approximately $947,000 for personnel and operational expenses of the county's Emergency Medical Services Department. This is a newly created initiative to provide paid first responder service for areas of the county that are struggling to support rescue calls with volunteer staff. The purpose of this program is not to replace our volunteer agencies, but to provide first response capabilities when a citizen calls for an emergency. This funding will provide resources for the equivalent of 9.6 full-time equivalent personnel, both full and part-time employees who will be serving as basic life support and advanced life support responders. The county will be receiving the results of an emergency services study conducted by the Virginia Department of Fire Programs in the weeks ahead, and recommendations from the study will be reviewed with you to determine how best to strengthen the county's response in this area. Montgomery County has been blessed for many years with strong volunteer fire and rescue agencies, and nothing that is being proposed is designed to diminish that appreciation, but to join with our volunteers in providing the highest level of support possible for our citizens. Several new positions are proposed in the fiscal year 2023 budget to help address the increased levels of service and responsibilities in several of our operating departments. In county administration, I'm proposing the addition of a safety and health compliance specialist who will evaluate work environments throughout the county and develop and enforce policies and procedures to protect county employees in order to maximize workplace safety and to minimize risk. In our finance and budget areas, I am recommending the addition of a budget analyst and also a senior accountant due to the greatly increased responsibilities associated with ARPA funding, long-term capital planning, increased grant, financial, and regulatory compliance and reporting, along with the ongoing fiscal agent responsibilities for a number of agencies, which include the Economic Development Authority, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, the MBC Development Corporation, the 911 Authority, our Regional Tourism Program, and the Public Service Authority. Another position has been funded for the Office of Elections to provide an additional assistant registrar as a result of the greatly increased workload in their area. Funding is also included to add an additional maintenance worker in the Parks and Recreation Department, and funding is also provided to convert one part-time kennel assistant to a full-time position in the Animal Care and Adoption Center. While not included in the operating budget, I am also recommending an additional position to support economic development's broadband function. This will initially be funded with American Rescue Plan Act funds combined with an existing funding for part-time wages in the Economic Development Department, and will transition to a county funding position if the need exists over this next several years. In the county's information technology area, additional funds of $101,000 are added to provide support for increased service costs, training, and hardware for various county operations. The sheriff's budget contains an additional $120,000 to address increases in contract medical support services for the jail. In general services, an additional $152,000 is provided to address increased costs of utilities, maintenance, and general operating costs. While these are only 3 examples of increased funding needs throughout the organization, many other departments are also receiving increased funding to provide the momentum for ongoing support for our citizens and businesses. For the 5th consecutive year, I'm recommending funding of $500,000 for New River Community College to allow NRCC to continue to provide the Accessing Community College Education program. These funds allow Montgomery County High School graduates to continue tuition-free education at NRCC with their commitment to provide service hours to the community in return. The county has supported students through this program with over $2 million committed to date. Once again this year, I'm extremely grateful to the county's department directors, agency heads, and constitutional officers for their active participation in the budget review process. This group of employees understands the fiscal challenges that face our local government, and they respect the board's fiscally conservative approach to budgeting. As occurs each and every year, requests for county funds far exceeded the resources that we have available to provide. Requests this year were no different and totaled $5 million in new funding, excluding compensation and benefits above what we had to be able to cover. The county's department directors, agency heads, and constitutional officers were also part of the review process for these budget requests and developed a ranking of the various requests. Although not ranked by the leadership team during the development of the annual budget, the county received request for increased funds from agencies outside of the local government totaling almost $650,000. The proposed budget provides a total of $2.9 million to various outside agencies and organizations, some of which are mandated as the county is contractually or statutorily required to provide these funds. My budget message to you this evening and the related workbook that you'll receive reflect many hours of work, review, revision, and preparation to get us to this point each year. Deputy County Administrator, CFO Angie Hill, Director of Management and Budget Mark Magruder, along with Paul Kaiser and Susan Dickerson in our finance area, work dutifully each year to bring all this information together so we can present it to you this evening. Public Information Director Jen Harris, along with Durley Aguilar on her staff, provide the creative magic that ensures our budget document, presentation, and information reflects our best efforts in communications. What I've learned over the years as we prepare a budget is I give them the general direction I'd like to see things go, and then I get out of the way. I look forward to reviewing the proposed budget information with you in more details in the weeks ahead. A special budget work session will be held on Monday, March 21st for the board to establish the advertised tax rate and advertised budget in order to meet required deadlines. The required public hearing on the proposed budget and tax rate are scheduled for a special Board of Supervisors meeting on Thursday, April 7th at 6 p.m. If all goes as planned, we ask that the board approve the proposed fiscal year 2023 budget at a special Board of Supervisors meeting on Monday, April 18th at 6 o'clock. There is one other special meeting that I did not mention in my budget message, and that is the joint meeting that we have scheduled with Montgomery County Public Schools, and that meeting will be on Tuesday evening, April 12th. I realized several weeks ago, and I think I made a comment in my manager's comments a couple of meetings ago, that this was the 32nd budget I'd been involved with. This is actually my 34th budget that I've had a hand in. Carol Edmonds, who was here, used to have a saying that she would say, I was around when she was around when God was a child. God wasn't a child, but he was probably a teenager when I came along. So I've been here for a while. A lot of things have changed since that first budget that I worked on back in 1990, but one thing has not changed. The effort of our local government employees to provide an austere budget to provide for the capital, operations, and human resources needed to meet the demands of the community. Montgomery County is a very diverse and growing community, and its citizens demand a responsive, industrious, and steadfast county government. I believe the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget continues the momentum of addressing these needs, and I hope you will feel the same way after your review. Your continued support and your leadership of our county government means so much to me and our leadership team. I'm confident the upcoming fiscal year will bring more success for our county. I welcome your comments and suggestions in the meetings ahead as we review the attached information. Thank you for allowing me to present the budget message to you. Now I'm going to call on Deputy County Administrator Angie Hill to walk through some of the more particulars of some of the numbers from the budget this evening. Thank you for your attention.
Try not to run into each other as we pass everything out to you. Thank you, Vicki. Thank you all again, as Craig said, for letting us present this to you tonight. And I do want to thank the same people that Craig thanked, because really we couldn't do this without everybody that is involved. And I email people at 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and they answer me and work really hard. Jen and Durley and Mark all really are committed to this process, and I do appreciate that. Craig talked a lot about many of the things I'm going to present to you in a little bit different format. I first wanted to talk about the base budget target process and how we go through the county budget process, which is a review for most of you, but for the people watching, I thought it would be good to make sure that everybody understands how that works. For the county's budget, the way we do the personnel budget is we evaluate the current positions, the people in those positions and their current pay as of a certain date. It's around the end of December. And we project what that will be through the end of the year. When we go through that, we identify salary savings from positions that have been vacant or have turned over. In other words, if a vacancy existed and then was filled with a lower paid position, we take that into account. And when we did that this year, we were able to cover our VRS increase, as Craig mentioned, with those vacancy savings, and also had about $100,000 left to offset other costs. Our operation and maintenance is capped from year to year. If there are one-time items in people's operating budgets, we do exclude those as they move forward. And then addenda requests are made by department directors and agency heads to us that are shown in the budget document that you have. And before we recommend any addenda request, we do challenge the base budget of each department. We make sure that they don't have sufficient funds already in their budget before we would recommend additional funding. After that, the requests are taken, as Craig mentioned, to the county's leadership team. And this meeting, we actually have several meetings in January and February, and it includes all department directors, constitutional officers, agency heads that are funded by the county. We give each of the department director and the agency heads an opportunity to present their request to the group, and then we have a survey monkey that we send out and let the department director and agency heads rank those requests. That really helps build teamwork with the group, helps us understand what our needs are, and gives a really good idea of what is the most critical for the current year. And then we pass that on to Craig, which is a critical factor in figuring out which of those items we're going to fund. This year, the county requests, including the requests from the departments and constitutional officers and agencies, and the compensation requests total $7.4 million. And as you know, the school operating request was $4.5 million for a total of $11.8 million. Our new undesignated revenue is $5.4 million. Actually, when Mark presented in January, it was 5.2, but you know, he's always checking those numbers and making sure that the trends are playing out like he thinks they're going to. So there was a little bit more money there. But the shortfall ended up being $6.4 million. And in order to fund all of those requests, an increase in the real estate tax would be 7 cents. That's what would be required to fund all of the requests. This year, 1 cent of the real estate rate is approximately $904,000, just a little less than that. Several items that we funded in fiscal year 22 and in previous years are continuing into 23. As Craig mentioned, we'll set aside 1.5 cents of the real estate tax for fire and rescue equipment, 1 cent of the real estate tax rate for future capital needs, including $100,000 for the Valley to Valley trails, $425,000 to continue with the Auburn Park project, $210,000 for information technology projects. Those would be more major infrastructure type items, and in order to move forward with that funding, those requests would have to come to the board and get appropriated for the specific project. The same consideration would be given for the $750,000 for capital maintenance projects for the county. Those requests also, if approved in this budget, would still come to you to get funded for the specific project. And then 2.5 cents of the real estate rate is for future school capital projects, which also would require additional board action. This is a summary of the funds that are included in the budget. The general government shown here is the portion that funds county operations. It's net of the transfers to other funds. And those are the same numbers that Craig included in his budget, just a little bit different format and different level of detail, and it shows the amount of increase in each fund. The reason that school capital and county capital went up just a little bit is to adjust for the penny value on the real estate tax rate. I also wanted to point out on this slide that this is the total funding. It's the additional undesignated and the designated revenue. And as you remember from last week, the schools received $3.999 million, which is $4 million. The schools are proposed to receive that from the state for capital items. And so that's not included in this number. And the schools did indicate that they would use $1.2 million of that for Chromebook replacement. So I just wanted to point that out as we were moving forward. That's a little bit different than it's been in prior years because the state hasn't offered that type of funding in previous years. This slide shows our undesignated dollars and how we split them out between the schools and the county. It also includes the difference of the penny increases that Craig spoke of earlier. And the total dollars from the county to the schools, including the pennies for their capital projects, is about 40% of the amount, and the amount for the county is 60%, which is, that goes along with the overall trend of how much the breakdown between undesignated funds between the schools and county generally is. Again, we have the proposed budget that shows where these dollars come from. You can see that the bottom part of this pie chart shows that 42% come from undesignated funds, which are federal, state, and other kind of designated funds. The rest of the funding comes from undesignated, with the vast majority of that coming from the real estate tax rate. This shows where our funds go, and again, this is the total budget. It includes the county funding and all other sources. And so the school portion for school nutrition and school capital is shown in the blue area of 60%, and then the debt service for schools is shown just to the left of that. School debt service is 8.9% for a total of 69.4%. This is the total general fund. It represents not just the governmental activities, but also the transfers to other funds. So you can see the vast majority of that, the vast category that is the largest is education. The other categories do make up more than half of the pie. However, the schools are the largest single area. And then debt service is also large, as is public safety, which I think goes to support the initiatives of this board and the priorities of the board. Of the new undesignated revenue of $5.4 million, 59% is allocated to 9 areas in the general government. And Craig reviewed those with you as well. We fund 12 county departments, 5 constitutional offices, 3 agencies that have separate boards, 4 court functions, 5 rescue squads, 5 fire departments, and 46 outside agencies. Craig also reviewed this with you in his message, the increased funding for county dollars for schools over the past 10 years. I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the major highlights of the budget this year. We did propose $2.1 million for the school operating fund, $1.4 million for the 5% wage adjustment for county employees, about $99,000 for the minimum wage required adjustment for the coming year. Then this number is an odd number, $939,702. That's how much we have set aside for our compensation plan. And the way we came up with that number, honestly, is we had a number in mind, and then we had a little bit of money left over, and that's where we put it. That's why it's $702. We don't know the exact results of that. We have preliminary results. We need to study those more, make sure that they're right and that people have been accounted for properly. Sometimes you can imagine that the consultants don't know exactly the detail of information that we know. We tried to make sure that they have all the accurate data that we can provide to them so that they can give us the best product. And then we work with them to figure out how we can fund the increases as fairly as we can. We have $946,000 to implement the paid emergency medical services, which I know we've presented to you several times, and Craig mentioned as well, which is 10.6 FTEs. And I'm going to go over the positions on the next slide. Also, $404,000 for 5 new full-time positions, 2 reclassifications, and to convert 1 part-time position to a full-time position. The positions added, as Craig said, include emergency services, which would be a full-time administrative coordinator and 6 full-time paramedics, 2 part-time paramedics at 12 hours per week. That equates to 0.6 of an FTE. And then 6 basic life support providers at 20 hours a week, so that would be 3 FTEs. The safety and compliance specialist, that ranked highly with the group when we reviewed that with the directors and constitutional officers. We're trying our best to cover this. It's spread out between a lot of departments, and it really makes a whole lot of sense to consolidate that and make sure that we have one person who specializes in that to make sure that we're making our workplace as safe as we can. The budget analyst, as you know, we're going to present to you a CIP this year. We're going to present a 5-year plan. The budget gets bigger every year, and Mark is really working his tail off. He needs help, so we are proposing that as well. The senior accountant position, again, more compliance requirements. There are more reporting requirements. We have more grant funds. We have 6 fiscal agent. We're fiscal agent for 6 entities, and we really haven't added staff to the finance department to cover these items over the past several years, so it's time that we need to do that as well. As you all know, the registrar is facing a lot of new laws this year related to absentee voting, same-day registration, and other requirements that are really putting a strain on her staff as well, so the group felt that that was an important position to fund. And then as we add parks, they need to be maintained. We don't need to have parks that we're not taking care of, so we've recommended a Parks and Rec maintenance worker. For the Animal Care and Adoption Center, we're recommending 1 part-time kennel assistant become full-time. It's difficult to keep that position staffed at a part-time level. It needs to be full-time. They have a lot of work that they need to do at the Animal Care and Adoption Center. They have a lot of volunteers who help, but they really need to have just a little bit more staff. They really could use more staff than this, but Eileen Mahan, who's the director, has just requested that this part-time position become full-time, and the group again felt that that was an important factor. These are the same things again that Craig mentioned. I won't go through each one of them because they are basically the same. And if you have questions for us later, we'll be glad to answer those. The $47,000 for contingencies, we tell you every year, that's to maintain our financial policies, which again is important that we show our financial strength, that we're setting aside 1% of the budget in the contingency fund for anything that might come up throughout the year. That is important as we go forward and begin the bond rating process as well. And then the few items that we have that we're addressing with you tonight that are not included in the budget, $920,000 could be provided to the schools as one-time funding for school buses. We are also recommending that we reallocate some existing funds, about $20,000 of existing funds, and use ARPA funds this year for $70,000 for a broadband position in the Economic Development Department. And then, as Craig mentioned, we don't know the amount of the debt service at this point. We won't know that until we sell the bonds, which will happen this spring. We do know, based on preliminary estimates from the financial advisors, Davenport and Company, we're certain that the county will be able to fund our portion of the increased debt service. And based on the latest projections, the schools would not have a significant increase in debt service, and it would drop off after a few years. So we felt like it was a good time to set those funds aside from one-time money instead of proposing that we give ongoing money to that currently. The upcoming dates, as Craig mentioned, on March 21st, we have a work session to establish advertised tax rate and budget, and then a public hearing on the budget and tax rate, and hopefully adopt the budget and tax rate on April the 18th. I know we've given you a lot of information tonight. If you have questions tonight, we'll be glad to try to answer them, or if they come up in the days ahead, we'll be glad to do that as well.
Well, Angie, thank you so much, you and everyone that's worked hard for this presentation. The hours and dedication and after hours to put in this, we greatly appreciate it. And I'll go around the room to see if the supervisors have any immediate questions. I know we will have lots of questions as we have time to look detailed through this, but I'll start off Supervisor King.
I got a lot of questions, so I'll just probably call tomorrow and set me up an appointment. And that way I won't prolong this meeting. Thank you.
Very good. Supervisor Fidzikowski.
I don't have any questions for tonight. I'll save mine for later, too.
Supervisor Shepherd.
I don't have any either. I'll wait.
Supervisor Bone.
I'd like to ask some questions. On page 2 of your presentation, Ms. Hill, the personnel updated for the current positions. What are the counties or cities that you compared yourselves to when you did the compensation study?
On this slide, we're not talking about the compensation study. We're talking about our current positions. I know some places they budget the subsequent year based on what their current year budget is. The point of this was that we don't do that. We look at the actual salaries that we're currently paying and project from that.
Okay.
Now, as far as the localities that we included in the compensation study, I'll have to get those for you. We do have the list. It's not in my head.
Is it safe to say it's beyond the Roanoke and New River valleys?
There are some entities that are outside of that area, yes.
On page 5, when you have school operating $4.4 million, you said that the state was giving the schools an additional $4 million, of which they're going to use 1.2 for Chromebooks, as well as outside of this, we're proposing one-time money for buses of $900,000, right?
Right.
and it's not operating budget, but it's a one-time. If you added the 900,000 to, because what that allows them to do is not find the 900,000 in their budget, what would it end up being that they would be getting percentage-wise? Do you have any idea if you added the 900,000?
Thought Mark might have a calculator, but no, I will get that for you. If we add the $920,000 to the 4.4 million, yes, I'll get that for you.
And then on the next page, new dollars to schools. I'm a little bit concerned on some of these donut graphs. Debt service moving forward based on the new debt that's going to be issued. Is that your best guess represented there of what the
It
new
does
debt
not include new debt. That doesn't include new debt because we didn't include it in the operating budget for two reasons. The first reason is we don't know the amount. Also, we feel like we don't need to include it as part of the operating budget because, as you remember, we had a significant amount of funds left at the end of '21, and we're doing real well with our revenue this year as well. We're exceeding the estimates. So it makes more sense at this point to use one-time money. If you remember several years ago when we issued bonds, we had set aside funding and we shaved the peak of the debt. So in essence, we can do that with our fund balance now too. So we would not need to include it in the operating budget.
Excellent. Slide 12. So my question about the way that you did I'm going to say this, county's new compensation and classification plan. I think it's really important to note that the schools only compare themselves to New River Valley and Roanoke Valley schools versus the county employees are compared to beyond that.
For most of our positions in the comp and class study, we are only comparing to New River and Roanoke Valleys. However, for supervisory department level positions, we compete statewide. For instance, when we go out to look for a new planning director, we'll be not only looking in Virginia, we'll be looking in North Carolina and other communities as well. So for those positions, we cast a wider net. But for the vast majority of our positions, we will be using Roanoke and New River Valley comps for those.
And perhaps that's what they do in the schools for like superintendent and his direct reports or something like that. But I've never heard that they do that.
I can't speak for how the
Okay.
schools do their
I was wondering
compensation.
if you knew. On slide 13, for the emergency services, I imagine that you don't have any soft billing
No, we don't
revenue.
have soft billing built into this budget. We plan to speak with you and have work sessions with you in the future about that, but it's not built into this year. That's too much to tackle at one time.
And then could you tell me when the next reassessment's going to be?
Next year. So it would be effective January of '24. January 1st of '23, so it would go into full effect for the '24 budget, but January 1st of '23, they're doing the reassessment right now.
Okay. Slide 14, didn't hear a single thing about no increase in costs to the employees about medical insurance. Is that true?
That is true. There is no increase.
Pretty exciting.
Yes.
Thank you. You know how sometimes people present and they say one thing and the slide says another thing? You did that for slide 15. Second bullet, you said 70,000 and it shows 90,000. I'm wondering,
We're going to cover 20,000 from existing funds.
okay, thank you.
They have a part-time, they have funding for a part-time person that totals about 20,000. So the 70 is the ARPA amount.
Okay. I'm going to turn to, go ahead.
You know, when you look at all these numbers day after day after day, sometimes things pass you. In my budget message, I make a comment about 9.6 FTEs for emergency services. This says 10.6. I didn't include the full-time administrative coordinator in my number, so that's why there's a difference. When you put that up, it was like, whoa, okay.
Sorry.
No, that's not your fault. Anyway, I wanted to clarify that in case somebody called.
Mr. Meadows, if you could stay up, because I'm going to your document. On page 2, you mentioned the extra additional revenue of 100,000. I think, and I made a note one place, but it's probably referenced somewhere else, for Parks and Rec.
The $100,000 that would be generated from the cigarette tax, if the board implemented it, would be used to offset some of the expenses in Parks and Rec. We have that covered already in the budget, so it's not necessary to adopt the tax to cover that. However, that would free up $100,000 for other resources if the board implemented a cigarette tax.
Okay. I think I did the math at. So, you're gonna give the employees an across-the-board 5% raise, and then you're proposing to implement the findings of the compensation classification study, which is an additional almost $1 million. So that's about, some people are gonna get over 9%.
They could possibly get over 9%. Some people will probably only get 5%. It depends on where they are in the compensation as far as comparator to other localities. And what we're trying to do is get everybody adjusted to where they should be within the market range. One of the challenges, as I've shared with several of you, is with our entry level and 1 to 3 year positions, we need to make a fair amount of adjustment to get those positions into market. When you do that, then you start pushing those people into the folks that are in the 4 to 7 year range, and you create a lot of compression, so you have to make adjustments there. It's quite a challenge to be able to fully and accurately, as best as you can, implement a compensation study like we've done. But we don't have the final results yet, but we did have enough information that we could pretty closely estimate what we think it's going to take.
On page 6 of your document, second to last paragraph, you mentioned getting a senior accountant and budget analyst for ARPA funding and so on. What happens when ARPA is all done in a couple of years? That position's just going to stay there, and by then the county's grown and all that kind of jazz, right?
It's to address growth. We could justify those positions. We had several conversations about this. We could justify those positions without any additional ARPA money or CARES Act. That has just exacerbated it even more. So we need the help now, but with the growth that we've had, and also in the coming years, we're likely to have a few retirements that come from there. So it will balance itself out.
Great. Those are all my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Supervisor DeMonts.
Thank you both for your presentation. I don't really have any questions tonight. I know the process in the past has been that when any of us email questions, all of us are copied back so we can
Yes.
have, okay, so that'll continue. And then I
Yes.
just wanted to make sure that for the purposes of reporting this to other boards that we're part of, and I want to check specifically about Parks and Rec to make sure that I'm giving accurate information to them. You've got proposed in the budget $425,000 for the Auburn Park. What is already in, or do you know, or could you email me what we already have set aside for that park if you don't know?
I can email that to you, and also we're going to be bringing a CIP document to you in the near future that includes that as well. So while we're funding $425,000 toward that in this budget, we're also going to propose that is added to through the CIP process.
Okay, thank you. And then I read the section just very briefly in the big book because when you say we might be adding a new maintenance worker and $100,000, I kind of went, whoa, we're paying a lot for maintenance workers. But I'm seeing that we're addressing some minimum wage issues. Is Parks and Rec one of the few departments where we have a lot of the part-time lifeguards, summer type only, where we
There-
have people that have to be adjusted up to meet minimum wage?
There are only a few. General Services has some with the site attendants, and the library has some. Those are the largest. There may be a few others, but those are the vast majority.
Okay. And then that is all that I have for tonight. Thank you both so much, and to everybody that's been involved. I know it's a lot of work, so thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Biggs.
Also want to thank everyone for their hard work. I do have some questions on page 12. And the first question I have is, how many county employees do we have?
We have 411 FTE, 395 of them are full-time, and the others are part-time. The
Okay.
only reason I know that is because Craig asked me just before the meeting, and I looked in the book.
And, you know, many times when we're asked that question, we think about some of the outside, we think about the 911 authority, we
Right.
think about tourism. So when you, PSA, when you factor in all those other agencies, we have it's well over 450, but just direct responsibility for the county, Angie's numbers.
Okay. And then I want to find out on the school side how many employees they have, but we can find that out from them. Okay, I do have a concern about the amount of money going into the school operating fund because it's not even half of their request. And I'm really concerned about how they are going to be able to meet the 5% salary for their folks. And I'm looking at what we're investing in our folks, which I think is critically important. And we're basically, if you add up the compensation, the 5% plus the $939,702, we're putting in, what, $2,319 plus into our employees?
Absolutely. In prior years.
But we're not giving the schools, we're giving the schools less than that. And I realize they're getting state funding too for and we're get some for our, constitutional officers. But what I'm really concerned about here is how this is going to impact the employees on the school side. I know they make their own decisions, but I also know from experience that, I get hit, and I don't know if the rest of you get hit, but the thing is, well, the county employees get this and we only got that. That happens every year. So I'm really concerned, and I want to know from the schools how that is going to work.
Well, a couple of thoughts on that. First, we usually give about 40% of the new revenues to the schools. This year it's 39%. So we're pretty level with what we've done in the past. Secondly, you've heard the superintendent for several years now talk about getting the teacher salaries competitive from where they were to where they are. What I heard him say just recently is Salem's ahead of us, but the rest of them are Montgomery County's there. We're not there with our employees. It's not fair for them to be able to get their employees to the top of the grades, and we're not. So this is an attempt to address that. The third thing is, even though they're getting 39% of the new revenues, my budget recommended also giving them $920,000 of one-time money to purchase buses. It's my understanding from the school's presentation that $920,000 is in their budget to be funded by the schools. That frees up, if the board elects to do that with the one-time money, that frees up $920,000 for them to then put wherever they feel it needs to be put. If they want to put it to salaries, that's up to them. So I understand those concerns, but as I said in the budget message, we've heard in years past how the schools have tried and strived to build their salaries up to a level that is really at the top of their range for the area. It's time for us to do the same thing for our employees.
And I don't disagree with that at all. My concern is, I just want to know, and I guess, we can talk about that at the April 12th meeting. I just want to know how this impacts them, because I know there were there were localities last year that could not give the percentage from the state because they could not match it.
I did want to add as well, the $1.4 million for the 5% across the board increase, that's the gross number. It includes the amount that we're getting from the state, which is about $600,000. So that's not all new county money. So while we do, it's not really comparable to the 2.1 because we are,
Comp board funding.
right, what did I say?
Well, yeah.
It's the comp,
Comp board money.
Comp board, yeah.
Yeah, the comp board
constitutional
funding,
officers,
yes.
right, yeah.
So then that's all that.
right. So that does bring that number down for how much the county's providing for that.
Good. And I think it's really good on the school side and the county side about the health insurance. That's really good news. So, all right, thank you.
Very good. Just a couple comments. First of all, I think it's great that everyone in leadership, it works together as a team. That way they have transparency and they can know and set what they think is a priority as well. So I think that that is great teamwork, and I commend the county for doing that. That's a good idea, that everyone understands the needs and then they can prioritize and put that forward. I also think it's very good for the addendum that you challenge all of that to make sure we know where the money's going. As good stewards of taxpayers' money, we want to make sure we know how it's used and challenge that it's using at the best it can be done. And so I commend you all on all of that. I was going to, Mr. Meadows already corrected on the full-time for the emergency, and that was the administrative. And I'm very happy that the health cost is not, increased for our employees. That is great as well. And I think for our county employees, it's time that we do compensate and get them to where they need to be. When will that compensation study be available?
We have a draft now, and the HR director, Clay McCoy, and I are going to go through that and look at that, and Craig meets with the group as well. It will be before the budget's approved. It will be within the next month or so.
That's good. That was my next question. Will it be available before we have to take a vote?
Yes.
Do you know already on preliminary, is there one group of employees from the county that are really not where they need to be, that was more than others?
We didn't look at specific categories of people yet. We did look at people based on their tenure, and there are some people that have been here 8 years who are making minimum bottom of the pay band. So we did look at that more at this point, rather than the specific positions. We do know public safety, the sheriff's office, is definitely an issue that we need to address.
All right. And also, am I to understand correctly that for the outside agencies, there was an increase of request of $650,000? Was that correct?
That includes a lot of outside agencies that have never been funded by the county before, but that is correct. And we can give you more information about that as well.
Okay. All right. Very good. Does anybody have any follow-up questions or comments?
I was just going to add one more thing. We mentioned a couple of specific dates in the presentation. But of course, with our regular meetings, like next Monday night, which is March 14th, we will have a work session scheduled for that evening if board members have questions. Also, one of the other board members, I think, already mentioned when, I believe Ms. DeMott's mentioned, when we get questions from a board member and we provide responses, we copy everybody, because one of you may be thinking it, or one of you may ask, but four of you may be thinking it. That way we can make sure we're covering everything. But whatever questions you have, please let us know. We're here to help.
And then the only added is that joint school board meeting on April the 12th.
Yes, ma'am.
Anything else?
I got one
Yes,
thing,
yes.
if you would. You know, we was discussing these outside agencies that we fund, and now there's $600-some thousand new. Could we get a list of them new people? You know, the board has discussed this several times about if we're given to different organizations that do the same thing.
Yes, we will do that for you. We'll provide that, and I think we provided some information earlier, but we'll send that back to you with the updates about what the different agencies do, and it's kind of toward the back of this book, but
Right.
After you brought that up before, that we tried not to fund agencies that provide duplicative services, but sometimes there's like a housing, if you look at housing, there are a lot of agencies that we fund that provide housing, but they provide housing to different groups of people. So we do take that into account as well.
Yeah. Now,
So we do try to look at that, but we'll provide that for you.
that 600 some thousand million
Yes.
is, some of it is mandated, right? Or is these just new people come in and asked?
Some of the increases are mandated, yes. Some of the increases that we had to fund are mandated, yes.
Yes.
Well, out of that, this new money, if I could get a list of the new organizations that are involved, that come and ask for it.
Yes, I don't believe that we funded anybody that was a new agency. 600,000 was how much people requested, but we only funded a very small portion of that. And I believe that they were all existing agencies. But we'll get you a list of all the agencies that requested and the amounts that they requested.
All right, thank you.
I have a follow-up question.
Yes.
So there are organizations like NRVCS that the state mandates we should pay at a certain level, but nobody pays at that level?
That's correct.
So we're not going to pay any more than what we're paying-ish at this point in
That's
time?
right.
Okay, just wanted to be clear about that. Are they the only agency that we don't fully fund to the state mandated?
I think so. Yes.
Yep.
And that's recognized, as you said, statewide. That state has a funding formula that I think jurisdictions are supposed to provide 10%, but no one does that. And then they ask us to send a letter that says we're going to continue to increase and try to provide more funding, which we do try to provide more funding to them. But the people that are members of that in the New River Valley are continuing to fund at the same pace as the other entities.
Thank you.
Anything?
Just, also under other agencies, I like the fact that you all did put mandated and non-mandated in here. That really is helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And again, we appreciate for the public to see how thick this book is. It's detailed of everything, how your tax dollars are spent for us to look at and make those decisions. Will we have, I don't know if Mr. Krantz can answer this, will we have a detailed book similar to this before our joint meeting with the school board? Very good. Okay, very good.
Is this book online for the public to, view?
It will be in the morning. I don't know if it is now. We make sure that you get it first. No one but you.
Yep, thank you.
Very good. All right. Everybody good? All right, well then, thank you all very much. We do appreciate this meeting is adjourned.
Speak to you a minute.
This way.